Hello, and welcome. I'm Stephanie Turner, and with me today is my partner, Natalie Schoonover. We are the co-founders of LaunchPoint Talent. But before we built this company, we spent a combined 4 decades on the employer side of early career recruiting. So between us, we have overseen the hiring of thousands of college students into both full-time roles and internships. Everything that we're prepared to share with you today comes from having sat on that employer side of the table. And we want to start with this. The students who are, there we go. We want to start with this. The students who are furthest ahead in September are the ones who were intentional with their time and experience this summer over the course of these next few months. Not the ones who had the most prestigious internship, not the ones who spent the summer looking busy, the thoughtful ones, the intentional ones. And today we're going to show you exactly what that looks like, whether you have a formal internship this summer or not. So here's what we will cover in the next 30 minutes. First, if you have an internship, we want to talk to you about what it takes to earn that return offer, to convert into either another internship or a full-time offer post-grad. Most interns, they focus on the work. And listen, we're not here to argue that the work is necessary, but securing a return offer is so much more. Second, if you have a more common or more typical summer job, we're going to show you the real skills you're building and why employers care more about how you work than where you worked. And then lastly, for everyone in the room, we're going to talk about what to do before the summer ends so that you are ready to go when that fall recruiting season ramps up. Really quick, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Drop in questions as we go along. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can in the last 5 minutes or so. Okay, with that, Natalie, let's get into it.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. Hello, everyone. We're going to talk first about internships. So if you're a student heading into your summer internship, or maybe you've even already started, these next few minutes are for you. And I want to start by naming the thing most interns believe going into the internship. I think Stephanie alluded to this, but most interns believe that if they do good work, a return offer will just come. And I understand why so many interns think that, because historically, that has been a really common outcome. You work hard, you deliver results, you'll get recognized and rewarded, hopefully, with that return offer. So the assumption there isn't wrong. Strong work is absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient today, especially not in this market. So even in a rebounding market, the stat shows that nearly 4 in 10 interns still don't get a return offer. So that work alone is not going to guarantee the outcome they're hoping for. The difference between interns who convert either into another internship opportunity at that company or a full-time role, and then the interns who don't convert, it's almost never the quality of their output. So what is it? We're going to jump into that. We built our return framework here on the slide for this specifically. Each letter stands for the 6 things that we've seen that separate interns, strong interns, from the pack, the ones who get offers versus the ones who don't. So we'll start with relationships. This summer is about deeply investing in your network, in the people you meet in the office, whether you meet some new faces at client sites or those you work directly with. Focus here on building 2 to 3 strong relationships, not 25 surface level ones. We would suggest prioritize your manager and then 1 or 2 additional team members. Now, the easy part of this is kind of the transactional part. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Do it throughout the summer. Don't wait till the end of the internship. And we'll talk a little bit more about the harder part of this, which is genuinely cultivating those relationships. All right, E is for energy. And I know this sounds so basic, but your attitude and your enthusiasm show up before your experience does, especially in this early career space. So be present, stay engaged, ask thoughtful questions. That curiosity is what will make you memorable to your team members. Also, seemingly basic is the for time management. But I can't tell you how many times we see this one pop up. Be the person that people can count on. Show up early, deliver on time, communicate proactively when those timelines shift. And when hurdles happen, because they will, it's okay. It's more about how you clear those hurdles. So, one of the most memorable examples I had was with an intern who overslept, and we've all been there, we've all done it. It's the life lesson I think we've all had to learn. But the hurdle he failed to cross in this life lesson was how he handled it. When he showed up late, he didn't address his tardiness, he didn't apologize, and he showed up with a Starbucks. And Starbucks isn't the enemy here, but his manager noted he took the extra time to get his coffee, to stop somewhere before he got to the team when he was already late. So it speaks volumes to the manager, that time management skill. All right, well, we're going to move on to you, our upward communication here. This is one of the fastest ways to earn trust. It's so simple. Communicate before someone has to ask you for it. So send those updates proactively, surface the challenges that you're having quickly, and keep your manager informed on your progress, on your priorities. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. All right, R is for results. This is where some of that effort matters, but outcomes matter more. Asking early on what success looks like and aligning your work to those team goals, that's what's going to help you deliver value to the team and not just stay busy. I think some of the best interns we've seen looked at their assignments and asked themselves, how can I leave this team, this project, or this process better than I received it, better than I inherited it? All right, and the last step here of our return framework is next steps mindset. So if you're enjoying the experience this summer, say it. Tell somebody that you're having a great time. Don't leave your future up to chance. So express interest in returning before the internship ends, and don't wait for someone else to bring it up to you. All right, let's do a little bit deeper dive here on the insights that we've seen from the employer side. And this is, I would say, 3 things that most interns never actually hear throughout the summer. First, managers are evaluating how easy are you to manage as an intern. So it's not just that quality of your input, but can they trust you to stay on top of things, to surface those problems early, and really to just keep momentum moving without the constant follow-up. So those habits will stand out. Second, this is back to that relationships conversation we started earlier. 2 or 3 real relationships are worth more than a whole boatload of the surface level ones. We've seen interns spend all their energy trying to meet everyone in the office, everyone at the company. And that might be advantageous if you're trying to build a really broad network. But what we've seen is developing a few deeper relationships will carry you further. So build something real by finding some one-on-one time, whether that's grabbing a coffee with them, going to lunch with them. And then when you have that one-on-one time, be intentional about the questions you ask and really take initiative in those conversations. All right, and third, I think most interns wait to be told that they did really well on a project or really well on their assignment. But the interns who earn offers, they ask how they're doing. They're seeking out that feedback. And a tip here, a better feedback question to ask is share with your manager, I'm working on this skill. And how did I do on this project in regards to building that specific skill? So it's deeper. It's actually easier to answer than just that how am I doing question. And then the manager is trying to come up with, what have you been working on and what sort of output have you done? So ask the better question. All right, speaking of better questions, we're going to share this is the script for you for the end of the internship. We would suggest ask this question ideally in the last like 2 to 3 weeks. Don't leave it for the last day. But the question here right on the screen, I've really enjoyed working with the team. What would the process look like to be considered for a return offer? That's it. That's all you need to ask. It's not awkward. It's not too aggressive. I share that from sitting in a former employer seat. It just signals interest. It shows that you're thinking about the future and it opens the conversation that if it wasn't going to happen otherwise, it was going to be a surprise to you at the end. So you might as well eliminate that surprise ending and ask the question. All right, here's the thing we want you to walk away from in this section. The bar for earning that return offer, it's not perfection. It's more about your presence, showing up fully, that communication, especially in the proactive phase of it. And it's building those real connections. And then, like we talked about, having that confidence to say you want to come back. During our hiring of thousands of interns, the ones that were marked for return honestly weren't necessarily having the strongest project feedback or the highest GPAs. It was the interns that were coachable and their managers wanted them back. They wanted them back in the room with them. And I would say that's the standard worth aiming for during your experience this summer. All right, Stephanie. So let's move on to our students who maybe aren't spending their time in an internship, but have a summer job that they're going to be having a great time executing on this summer.
Perfect. Yes. We're going to shift gears a little bit to those of you that aren't in formal internships, but also for the parents in the room who might be, quietly wondering whether or not that matters. So, we hear some version of this, of what's on the screen. We hear this constantly. My student is lifeguarding, or I'm working at a restaurant. I'm a server. I'm a camp counselor. And underneath that is always the same current, the same worry. Am I falling behind? And here's what we want you to sit with. The job title is not the point. Full stop. That's not the point. As an employer, some of the candidates who stood out most, they walked in with experience that had absolutely nothing to do with corporate. What they had was evidence of how they worked, how they handled pressure, how they showed up for a team, how they dealt with situations when they went sideways. That's really what most hiring managers are trying to assess in interviews, right? Those real life skills. And the reality is, you don't need an impressive job title to build those skills that they're seeking. So let me progress us. Here are 8 skills that we want to talk with you about. But the first thing I want you to do is just look at this list and notice that not one of them says or even suggests that you would have needed to have some sort of corporate position or professional position or internship to develop them, right? Reliability, communication, composure, initiative, accountability, teamwork, problem solving, time management. These are the things that show up on those hiring rubrics at companies of every size, in every industry. These are the qualities that recruiters and hiring managers are probing for, they're digging for in the behavioral interview questions that they're asking. And every single one of these can be built in a summer job that has nothing to do with a corner office or a professional setting. The question isn't whether you or your student, if you're a parent here with us today, it's not whether or not you're building these skills. You almost certainly are. The question is, do you know it? And are you able to articulate it? Will you be able to articulate it when it counts most? So let's bring this to life a little bit. This next slide gives you kind of the categories, but not necessarily not necessarily the stories behind them. So thought we could do just a couple of examples. When a student tells me that they spent the summer as a lifeguard or a camp counselor, we'll use these first two as an example. Here's what I'm actually hearing. As a lifeguard, you're responsible for other people's lives, staying focused in what one could argue is like the most distracting environment, making fast decisions under real pressure. If you can frame that well and it lands, it might land even better than someone who had an internship on paper, but actually spent 10 weeks, I don't know, managing their manager's calendar, right? Or a camp counselor. You can't fake your way through managing a group of 8-year-olds. And I can say that as a mom, that conflict that you're working through, the meltdowns, even the energy, the excitement, you either figure out how to lead without authority or you lose the room, you lose the group. That skill is genuinely hard to find, honestly, at any level. And as employers, we looked for it constantly. Food service, retail, they're worth quickly highlighting and we think about them somewhat together because they're building similar muscle, even though they're from different angles. The pace, the pressure, the team interdependence, that expectation that you stay professional, even with a customer who could be being completely unreasonable. And we've all been there, we've all seen it. We know that that exists. Those environments train composure faster than any corporate onboarding program ever will. So these patience, de-escalation, these qualities, they translate directly into client-facing professional work. This is an exercise I want for each of you to do. We won't go through all of these, but for all the jobs you're doing, all the jobs that you have done, the ones that we haven't named, I want you to sit with what is it? What is it that I'm actually doing? What does it require of me every single day? What might fall through the cracks if I'm not there? The skills, the behaviors that employers value most are almost always present. They need to be identified, they need to be named, and then they need to be translated. And we always say, don't leave that up to your interviewer. Do the positioning. That's the work. And honestly, it's the work that you should be doing before September. So, how do you actually make the summer count? This slide gives you 3 ideas. I will say it's not a fully comprehensive list, but it's a great place to start. And I am going to tell you why each one of these matters. Taking ownership before you're asked is about more than just work ethic. It's essentially a signal. Good managers notice who identifies a problem and moves towards fixing it without being told. That quality is rare enough that when it shows up, people remember it. So I want you to look around your workplace right now. What needs doing that no one is tackling? Start there. You do not need permission to be the person who notices. The next one, observing how strong people operate. It is probably one of the most underused tools that students have at their disposal. Every workplace has that one or two people that everyone respects, right? They're not necessarily the most senior. They're definitely not the loudest. They're the ones who stay calm when things get hard. They are constantly earning the trust of the people around them. Pay attention to what they're actually doing, how they communicate when something goes well, how they communicate when something goes wrong. How do they handle that difficult customer that we just talked about? That's transferable in a way that job titles aren't. And third, weekly reflection. It's the one that students skip, and it's the one that's going to pay off like 3, 4, 5 months from now. When you're sitting across from an interviewer who asks you to tell them about a time, tell them about a time you took on a leadership responsibility, you handled pressure. If you haven't been paying attention, if you weren't taking notes and journaling about your work, you won't have an answer, at least not at the depth that an interviewer is going to be seeking. So 10 minutes once a week, notes to yourself. What challenged me? How did I respond? What did somebody trust me with? What would I do differently? Write it down because that is what's going to become your interview material. It's gold. I said three, but we gave you a bonus. The last one here is just LinkedIn outreach. And this one matters beyond the summer. Natalie already mentioned it. The person that you reach out to today could be the referral that gets your resume in front of a human being in September, right? Instead of disappearing into the applicant tracking system, it gets in front of human eyes. So reach out to someone doing work that interests you, that you're curious about, someone new. Tell them what drew you to their profile, what drew you to their path, what you're hoping to learn. One message this week, and honestly, every week that follows. Most students won't do this, and that's probably the reason why you should. Okay, Natalie, let's bring it all together. Something for everyone in this next section.
I love that, Stephanie. Yes, we're gonna talk a little bit more about that LinkedIn outreach, but this is for everyone, whether you have an internship or that common summer job. Fall recruiting readiness should be had by all. So we've talked about making the most of what you're doing right now. Now we're going to talk about what you'll do with it. We call it fall recruiting, but honestly, it begins the moment the semester starts. So here's something most students find out the hard way. The early career recruiting calendar does not always wait for the academic calendar. A lot of companies open their fall recruiting applications and their pipelines in August before school starts, before students are even mentally back into job search mode, and before a lot of them have even updated their resume. So we've seen students miss their target companies entirely, not because they're not qualified, but because the window opened and closed while they were focused on just getting settled back into that campus rhythm. So, what you put in place this summer determines whether you're ready when that window opens and or whether you're scrambling to catch up. So, we're going to talk about three things to tackle before the semester begins. First, here is identifying your target. This is the one I think most students resist because it feels like you're closing a window or you're narrowing in instead of keeping your opportunities very, very broad. But when you know what you're going after, whether that's a specific role or function or a specific kind of company, a specific industry, your resume will get sharper. Your outreach is going to get more specific, and even your interviews will get stronger. So, how this plays out, what we've seen in the recruiting process, if a student knows what they want, they get moved into a specific candidate pipeline for a specific role, and they get considered for that role. And then those students that are undecided or applied to many different roles within a company, they get placed last in a pipeline that says they could go anywhere because the recruiter is left deciding for them which role they should be considered for. So I think it goes without saying, if you want to be moved into a pipeline and considered first, know what you're targeting, know what roles you're targeting. All right, second on here, updating your resume and your LinkedIn profile before that pressure hits of the semester. We've worked with students who had really strong experience and yet a really weak resume. And I think it's because it was built potentially the night before a deadline, right? So do this now while you can think clearly, your summer experience is fresh in your mind, and then ask someone you know to give you feedback on it. It only takes a few hours to do it right, but it is the thing that gets you past that first screen. And I would also say don't rely upon AI or don't solely rely upon AI. You can use it for brainstorming or generating ideas, but a copy paste of what AI spits out, it's so obvious to a recruiter, and it's genuinely just not the best work that a human brain can do. All right, lastly, we talked about those conversations this summer. Again, these are not applications, they're conversations with people who are doing the work you'd want to do at companies you'd want to join. And I'll reiterate what Stephanie said. You're not asking for a job. This is a learning experience to spend time together learning about the roles that you desire to be in one day. And after the conversation, send a thank you, send a follow up, send both, because these conversations done well become a referral for you, meaning that person refers you to their organization. And referrals move differently through the hiring process than cold applications. That's just the reality of how it works. All right. We see this pattern every single year. Most students treating recruiting as this sprint that starts in September or late August, and the summer feels separate from the job search. It's like a break between the work of school and the work of figuring out what comes next. So they set it all aside and tell themselves maybe they'll get serious when school starts. But that September arrives early. And students who land well don't have a secret advantage. They just get started earlier. They treat the summer less like a break and more like the first chapter of their job search. So by the time September hits, they're not, opening a new document and figuring out what do I want to put on my resume. They're actually following up on those conversations we talked about. They're already started and they're refining a target they've already thought through. So that's the shift. They're not just getting started. And this shift is available to anyone.
And just a quick 30 seconds here, just for the parents, the caregivers in the room. You're here because you care. We know that. Students with engaged and supportive parents, caregivers, support systems, they navigate this process differently and honestly, usually better. So, first, just, a thank you for showing up today. Here's what we've seen over and over in our work. The students who take real ownership of their job search, they're the ones who feel like it's theirs. It's not their parents, it's not something that's being managed for them. It's truly theirs. So your job this summer isn't to push. It's to create the conditions, the environment where your student can think clearly about what they actually want. It's to ask those open-ended questions. What are you curious about? What does a good outcome look like to you? What feels hard right now? And then to listen more than you advise. That's not stepping back. We sometimes hear that. That's not stepping back. It's truly the most useful thing that you can do right now, because when they arrive back to campus in September, the ones who've had someone ask them those good questions, they're faring well. But the ones who asked good questions and got out of the way are faring best. So, quick little close, and then we do have some questions here that we want to get to. So, really quickly, here's what we wanted to kind of leave you with today. The summer has this strange feeling of being both long and short at the same time, long in the middle of it, but short when you kind of turn around and look back. And the students who finish it well are the ones who, had an opportunity to think and pay attention to what they were building, to make intentional choices about how they spent their time, who noted the skills that they were building along the way. They weren't necessarily the ones who had the most impressive experience. This summer does sort of feel like a gap between where you are and where you want to be, but we'd love to reframe that for you as a runway, not a gap. And we'd love to tell you, use it intentionally. If today opened something up for you, if you recognized yourself or your student in anything that we covered, the next step is honestly very simple. The students who get ahead of their peers, they didn't get lucky. They made a decision at some point in the next few weeks over the summer to take this opportunity to sort of grab it by the horns and to get the right support around them. And that's exactly what we do. We offer a free 20-minute career strategy call, no pitch, no pressure, a real conversation about where you are right now, what's working, what's getting in the way, and what a clear path forward actually looks like. This is the exact work that we do with our private clients every day. You'll leave with clarity on your next step regardless of what you decide to do after that. And for everyone who joined today, we do have some free resources that we're going to send out with the replay, the return framework that Natalie covered, and also it's called the hidden career skills you're building this summer. And it's built for that second set of students we talked about, the ones who are in more of that common summer job. So we will get all of that to you after the call wraps. But in the meantime, I know we're a little over, Natalie, but since we are going to send the replay, and because we have some really good questions in here, I think we can sneak in like two, maybe three.
We'll sneak them in. Yes.
Okay.
All right. If you have more questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, or we also are happy to take questions via email. But I'll take us through the first one that came through the chat, Stephanie.
Okay.
And then maybe you can do the second one that I see coming in. And then the rest we'll have to save for another call. But the question here is, what's the one thing you wish interns did more of? Such a good question. It's hard to narrow it down to one. But I would go back to the communication piece. It is about communicating upward, as we said, but it's also figuring out how much to say, when to say it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen interns struggle, not because they weren't doing the job, they were, but they didn't know how to, their manager didn't know like what they were working on, or they took too long because they didn't ask the question right away. They didn't know that they were stuck. I'd also say find the next person in line. And maybe there's a staff that just joined the company. They're only a few weeks, a few months ahead of you. Because sometimes I realize the manager can feel intimidating. So start with more of a peer with some of your questions, like find a safe space. Because the important thing is that you're not just sitting there spinning your wheels, and you're also not asking a question every 5 minutes, right? So it's finding that right balance in the communication space. And I would also just share, let your manager see how you think, not just what you produce, not just the outcome. They're really evaluating, like, is this a critical thinker? What are they working through on their end as they're, working through the assignment or the project? So that's the one thing I would say is the communication piece, learning how to navigate that, refine that throughout the internship.
Love
All
it.
right.
Perfect. I think I'm going to do one of the ones that's more obviously from a parent. So this one says, my kid doesn't seem worried about recruiting. What do I do or what do I say? And I guess I would say first, like some students are genuinely not worried because they've got a plan, right? So before you react, I think you need to ask, like, what is your plan for fall recruiting? Or I know that recruiting happens in the fall. How do you plan to approach it? If they have a plan, support it. That's great. If they don't, I think that's more of the conversation to have. And it's not like, have you applied or where have you applied, but more of the like, what do you think you want? Right. So I would say most students who seem unbothered are not unmotivated, they're unclear. That clarity, I think, is the first problem you want to tackle. The other thing I would say is that our strongest clients, the strongest students that we work with are the most open to coaching. And when we think about it, like they're the student athletes, right? They've had a coach their entire life and they don't see support as like something is wrong. They almost view it more as like, this is how I get to perform at my highest level, as I have access to incredible coaches and insider knowledge. The same is true of strong students. They seek that feedback, whether it's from their professors or mentors, right? They use coaching to improve. So it is also possible that your student just doesn't know that this sort of support exists for recruiting. And again, that's really the conversation that our consult call is designed to start. Natalie, I'm seeing a few more questions. I think we'll try to take that offline to email. We'll wrap this up here. Appreciate that so many of you have hung on a little bit longer.
I totally agree, Stephanie. But this really is the exact conversation we love having. We're so grateful you all spent, the last 30 minutes with us. A few things before we let you go. If we didn't get your question answered, on the screen here is our LaunchPoint Connect email address. We read everything, so we'll get back to you if you have a question you'd like answered. As Stephanie mentioned, the replay, along with 2 of those free resources we mentioned, they'll be in your inbox shortly. So look out for those and feel free to share them with anyone you think could use them. And then if you want to stay connected, you can always find us on LinkedIn. And we have LaunchPoint accounts on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We do post regularly our tips and tricks on employer insights and early career recruitment, and really how students can get ahead in this process. So if today resonated with you all, find us on social. There's a lot more where that came from. So thanks so much, and go have a great summer, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.